Okay, friends, let's finish chapter 3, and that'll be the end of our read-alouds for today. Then I called the maid who was to go with me to the woods and perform the rites of Zardina, and told her to wake me very early in the morning. And I became merry with her and gave her wine to drink, but I had mixed such things in her cups that I knew she must sleep for a night and a day. As soon as the household and my father had committed themselves to sleep, I arose, and put on an armor of my brother's, which I always kept in my chamber in his memory. I put into my girdle all the money I had, and certain choice jewels, and provided myself also with food, and saddled the mare with my own hands, and rode away in the second watch of the night. I directed my course not to the woods where my father supposed that I would go, but north and east to Tashbaan. Now for 3 days and more I knew that my father would not seek me, being deceived by the words I had said to him. And on the 4th day we arrived at the city of Azim Balda. Now Azim Balda stands at the meeting of many roads, and from it the posts of the Tisroc, may he live forever, ride on swift horses to every part of the empire, and it is one of the rights and privileges of the greater Tarkans to send messages by them. I therefore went to the chief of the messengers in the house of imperial posts in Azim Balda and said, O dispatcher of messages, here is a letter from my uncle Ahoshta Tarkan to Kidrash Tarkan, lord of Calaver. Take now these 5 crescents and cause it to be sent to him. And the chief of the messengers said, To hear is to obey. This letter was feigned to be written by Ahoshta, and this was the signification of the writing. Ahoshta Tarkan to Kidrash Tarkan, salutation and peace. In the name of Tash the irresistible, the inexorable, be it known to you that as I made my journey toward your house to perform the contract of marriage between me and your daughter Aravis Tarkina, it pleased fortune and the gods that I fell in with her in the forest, when she had ended the rites and sacrifices of Zardina according to the custom of maidens. And when I learned who she was, being delighted with her beauty and discretion, I became inflamed with love, and it appeared to me that the sun would be dark to me if I did not marry her at once. Accordingly, I prepared the necessary sacrifices and married your daughter the same hour that I met her, and have returned with her to my own house. As we both pray and charge you to come hither as speedily as you may, that we may be delighted with your face and speech, and also that you may bring with you the dowry of my wife, which by reason of my great charges and expenses I require without delay. And because thou and I are brothers, I assure myself that you will not be angered by the haste of my marriage, which is wholly occasioned by the great love I bear your daughter, and I commit you to the care of all the gods. As soon as I had done this, I rode on in all haste from Azim Balda, fearing no pursuit, and expecting that my father, having received such a letter, would send messages to Ahoshta and go to him himself, and that before the matter was discovered I should be beyond Tashbaan. And that is the pith of my story, until this very night, when I was chased by lions and met you at the swimming of the salt water. And what happened to the girl, the one you drugged? Asked Shasta. Doubtless she was beaten for sleeping late, said Aravis coolly, but she was a tool and spy of my stepmother's. I am very glad they should beat her. I say, that was hardly fair, said Shasta. I did not do any of these things for the sake of pleasing you, said Aravis. And there's one other thing I don't understand about that story, said Shasta. You're not grown up. I don't believe you're any older than I am. I don't believe you're as old. How could you be getting married at your age? Aravis said nothing, but Bree at once said, Shasta, don't display your ignorance. They're always married at that age in the great Tarkan families. Shasta turned very red, though it was hardly light enough for the others to see this, and felt snubbed. Aravis asked Bree for his story, and Bree told it, and Shasta thought that he put in a great deal more than he needed to about the falls and the bad riding. Bree obviously thought it was very funny, but Aravis did not laugh. When Bree had finished, they all went to sleep. The next day, all 4 of them, 2 horses and 2 humans, continued their journey together. Shasta thought it had been much pleasanter when he and Bree were on their own, for now it was Bree and Aravis who did nearly all the talking. Bree had lived a long time in Calormen, and had always been among Tarkans and Tarkan horses, and so of course he knew a great many of the same people and places that Aravis knew. She would be always saying things like, but if you were in the fight of Zalindra, you would have seen my cousin Alamash. And Bree would say, oh yes, Alamash, he was only captain of the chariots, you know. I don't quite hold with chariots or the kind of horses who draw chariots. That's not real cavalry. But he is a worthy nobleman. He filled my nose bag with sugar after the taking of Tibet. Or else Bree would say, I was down at the lake of Mesril that summer, and Aravis would say, "Oh, Mesril, I had a friend there, Lazareline Tarquina. What a delightful place it is, those gardens and the Valley of the Thousand Perfumes." Bree was not in the least trying to leave Shasta out of things, though Shasta sometimes nearly thought he was. People who know a lot of the same things can hardly help talking about them, and if you are there, you can hardly help feeling that you're out of it. Hewan the mare was rather shy before a great war horse like Bree, and said very little, and Aravis never spoke to Shasta at all, if she could help it. Soon, however, they had more important things to think of. They were getting near Tajban. There were more and larger villages, and more people on the roads. They now did nearly all of their traveling by night, and hid as best they could during the day, and at every halt they argued and argued about what they should do when they reached Tajban. Everyone had been putting off this difficulty, but now it could be put off no longer. During these discussions, Aravis became a very little, less unfriendly to Shasta. One usually gets on better with people when one is making plans than when one is talking about nothing in particular. Bree said the first thing now to do was to fix a place where they would all promise to meet on the far side of Tajban, even if by any ill luck they got separated in passing the city. He said the very best place would be the tombs of the ancient kings on the very edge of the desert. Things like great stone beehives, he said. You can't possibly miss them. And the best of it is that none of the Calormans will go near them because they think the place is haunted by ghouls and are afraid of it. Aravis said if it wasn't really haunted by ghouls, but Bree said he was a free Narnian horse and didn't believe in these Calorman tales. And then Shasta said he wasn't a Calorman either and didn't care a straw about old stories of ghouls. This wasn't quite true, but it rather impressed Aravis, though at the moment it annoyed her too. And of course she said she didn't mind any number of ghouls either. So it was settled that the tombs should be their assembly place on the other side of Tajban, and everyone felt they were getting on very well, till Hewan humbly pointed out that the real problem was not where they should go when they had got through Tajban, but how they were to get through it. "We'll settle that tomorrow, ma'am," said Bree. "Time for a little sleep now." But it wasn't easy to settle. Aravis's first suggestion was that they should swim across the river below the city during the night and not go into Tajban at all. But Bree had two reasons against this. One was that the river mouth was very wide, and it would be far too long a swim for Hewan to do, especially with a rider on her back. He thought it would be too long for himself too, but he said much less about that. The other was that it would be too full of shipping, and of course anyone on the deck of a ship who saw two horses swimming past would be almost certain to get inquisitive. Shasta thought they should go up the river above Tajban and cross it where it was narrower, but Bree explained that there were gardens and pleasure houses on both banks of the river for miles, and that there would be Tarkans and Tarkinas living in them and riding amongst the roads and having water parties on the river. In fact, it would be most likely the place in the world for someone meeting him who would recognize Aravis or even himself, the horse. "We'll have to have a disguise," said Shasta. Hewan said it looked to her as if the safest thing was to go right through the city itself from gate to gate, because one was less likely to be noticed in a crowd. But she approved of the idea of disguise as well. She said, "Both the humans will have to dress in rags and look like peasants or slaves, and all Aravis's armor and our saddles and things must just be made into bundles and put on our backs, and the children just pretend to drive us, and people will think we're only pack horses." "My dear Hewan," said Aravis rather scornfully, "as if anyone could mistake Bree for anything but a war horse, however you disguised him." "I should think not indeed," said Bree, snorting, and let his ears go ever so slightly back. "I know it's not a very good plan," said Hewan, "but I think it's our only chance. And we haven't been groomed for ages, and we're not looking quite ourselves. At least, I'm sure I'm not. I do think if we get well plastered with mud and go along with our heads down as if we're tired and lazy and don't lift our hooves hardly at all, we might not be noticed. And our tails ought to be cut shorter, not neatly, you know, but all ragged." "My dear madam," said Bree, "have you pictured to yourself how very disagreeable it would be to arrive in Narnia in that condition?" "Well," said Hewan humbly, because she was a very sensible mare, "the main thing is to get there." Though nobody much liked it, it was Hewan's plan which had to be adopted in the end. It was a troublesome one, and involved a certain amount of what Shasta called stealing, and Bree called raiding. One farm lost a few sacks that evening, and another lost a coil of rope the next. But some tattered old boys' clothes for Aravis to wear had to be fairly bought and paid for in a village. Shasta returned with them in triumph just as evening was closing in. The others were waiting for him among the trees at the foot of the low range of wooded hills which lay right across their path. Everyone was feeling excited because this was the last hill. When they reached the ridge at the top, they would be looking down at Tashbaan. "I do wish we were safely past it," muttered Shasta to Hewan. "Oh, I do," said Hewan fervently. That night they wound their way through the woods up to the ridge by a woodcutter's track, and when they came out of the woods at the top they could see thousands of lights in the valley below them. Shasta had no notion of what a great city would be like, and it frightened him. They had their supper and the children got some sleep, but the horses woke them very early in the morning. The stars were still out and the grass was terribly cold and wet, but daybreak was just beginning far to their right across the sea. Erebus went a few steps away into the wood and came back looking odd in her new ragged clothes and carrying her real ones in a bundle. These and her armor and shield and scimitar and the 2 saddles and the rest of the horse's fine furnishings were put into the sacks. Bree and Hewan had already got themselves as dirty and bedraggled as they could, and it remained to shorten their tails. As the only tool for doing this was Erebus's scimitar, one of the packs had to be undone again in order to get it out. It was a longish job and rather hurt the horses. "My word," said Bree, "if I wasn't a talking horse, what a lovely kick in the face I would give you. I thought you were going to cut it, not pull it out. That's what it feels like." But in spite of the semi-darkness and cold fingers, all was done in the end. The big packs bound on the horses, the rope halters which were now wearing instead of bridles and reins in the children's hands, and the journey began. "Remember," said Bree, "keep together if we possibly can. If not, meet at the tombs of the ancient kings, and whoever gets there first must wait for the others." "And remember," said Shasta, "don't you 2 horses forget yourselves and start talking, whatever happens." That's the end of chapter 3 and the end of our read aloud today, and I will see you tomorrow for the beginning of chapter 4.